Hello, good afternoon, Toa. So, little introduction. My name's Sam Shead. I'm a journalist with Business Insider. I've been covering tech for several years now, and startups and venture capital is kind of one of the areas that I focus a lot of my efforts on. So I know a couple of these guys from over the years. So we have Zoe, Felix, Christophe, and Siraj. Do you guys all just want to let's start by doing a quick introduction. So, you tell me a little bit more about yourselves, where you've come from, and give me a bit of background on your respective funds as well. We'll start at the end with Siraj.
Cool, pleasure to be here. So my background, I'm a computer scientist turned entrepreneur. I moved to Silicon Valley in 2000 when the music had stopped and thought I'd start a company. It was not the right time. I joined Google early, left Google in 2006, started my own company, grew that to 2013. We had a successful exit, built something interesting in the ag tech machine learning space, and then I returned to Europe, where my family is, and joined Atomico, which is a London-based VC fund that actually did my seed round. Atomico has, in the 10 years since it was born, become one of the biggest in Europe, a 765 million fund. We invest Series A and beyond. And our particular focus and specialty is, deep tech, but we'll invest in any software-enabled business. We have a few exciting ones in Berlin as well.
You have quite a well-known founder and CEO at Atomico, I believe, don't you, Siraj?
Yes, the founder of Atomico was Nicholas Zenström, and I think that's the reason I joined. The DNA of Atomico is entrepreneurs. It's not, traditional finance people, which changes the whole way you have conversations. It changes how you work with entrepreneurs. I think it's the future of VC.
And just in case anyone doesn't know, I'm sure most of you do, but Nicholas was the founder and CEO of Skype, which had a very successful exit and was sold for billions. Christophe?
Well, I came to Berlin to build companies, late 90s. Did one in VR, learned that timing is important. Did digital maps. We sold that company to Nokia. And today I invest in early stage companies, quite active here in Berlin for a few years.
Felix, I'm actually a native Berliner. I started out as an entrepreneur, built 2 companies here in Berlin. The first was Places, that I also sold to Nokia, and then the second one was Amen. And then I turned VC, joined a fund, Faber Ventures in Lisbon, and now recently, as of this week, I joined Samsung Next, which is the innovation arm of Samsung, and we invest and acquire software and services businesses. It's a 150 million fund that we announced beginning of this year. And now I'm managing Europe out of Berlin. We're investing seed to Series B, and then we're also doing M&A and facilitate partnerships and help startups connect with Samsung.
And Zoe, I believe you're slightly different. Why don't you tell the audience how you...
Well, I'm not actually that different because it's a VC panel, but I see that there are only entrepreneurs on this panel. I guess this is pretty chilly. So I also have been an entrepreneur in Berlin for the past 15 years with some failures and some exits, like all of us in here. And now turned into it's actually not a fund in a classical sense. It's more a blockchain-based, investor-owned ecosystem, fundraising and funding ecosystem. I wouldn't say we have billions under management, but the limit of investment is billions and billions of dollars.
Okay, but one thing I think you can all agree on is you're all backing startups in Europe, and you're doing that for a reason. Europe has a lot of things going for it at the moment, and I think it'd be good to just kind of unpack a few of Europe's advantages over maybe Silicon Valley. Any of you got any thoughts on kind of why Europe is really excelling at the moment? Anyone want to jump in and kind of lead that?
Well, I guess Europe always had talent. Yeah? You look at the teams that did autonomous driving at Google or Uber, you'll find French and German names and Polish names. The problem was that there was no outlet for the talent. And I think this has now changed, both in terms of mentality. You see people who choose a startup instead of a career, and also in terms of support system. So support system is an ecosystem with a critical mass of people who know what they're doing, and it's also backers and supporters and innovation capital, venture capital. So I think the next 15 years you're going to see the fruit of that change turning into hopefully powerful companies.
Yeah, so we every November put out a very carefully researched report called The State of European Tech, and
I know it well. It's very good.
our head of research, Tom, he takes this really seriously. It's like an annual event for him. We have tens of data partners, from LinkedIn data to developer questionnaires and interviews. So it's very carefully researched, and we actually find Europe's on this not only a strong trend, but there are certain inherent advantages. So talent is one of them. For instance, we have.
Where is the talent?
It's distributed, but that's actually a good thing. Up until recently, that talent was quite mobile, and we'll see where that goes. But talent in Silicon Valley it's a choke point right now, right? I mean, it's very difficult for companies to grow if they can't hire, and it's very expensive, and people are not very loyal. You'll pay them a lot, and they'll still leave you in a year, and it kills your morale. That's not the case here, and it's getting more expensive, obviously, but it's still, from a talent perspective, a really good place to be. And to add to that, 5 of the top 10 universities by this Times survey are in Europe, which is crazy. 5 out of the top 10. So
So I guess we're talking kind of Oxford, Cambridge, and then
TUM, ETH, like across Europe, and that's when you go past the top 10, you have École Polytechnique and a lot of these other schools.
And do those grads, do they want to join startups now? Is their mentality changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I just spent the last 2 years in Portugal, which is a bit of a tier 2, tier 3 ecosystem. Until recently, not much going on, and now it's also exploding, and a lot of things are happening. And this is largely due to the fact that it just used to be, if your family sends you to a good school and basically invests in your education, you were expected to join McKinsey or join a large corporate. I think in France it was a very similar thing, that the elite schools in France, excellent schools, it was people would join Renault or the big energy companies or something like that, and that's changing right now in a lot of places, where maybe in Berlin or in London that's been a bit different for a while, but we don't realize that Europe is a big place, and these new rules, they're new, right? I mean, the new rules of the economy and entrepreneurship, and this whole mentality of failing fast, those are fairly new phenomena, and we've been a bit surprised by it, basically. Silicon Valley was ready for it, both in terms of capital and mentality. And then when the internet came, they were like, okay, this is a paradigm shift we can really ride. And I think we were maybe not, Europe wasn't entirely ready for it, but that's just 10 years. I mean, in the course of history, that's nothing, right? So we will see more paradigm shifts, more big new waves, and I think by now, both in terms of capital, talent, we are ready.
I think Europe is also a lot bigger than Europe seems to be. So both in terms of borders and in terms of mentality. So for instance, in our team here in Berlin, we have only 16 people and only 3 Europeans, or Western Europeans. The rest is coming from Eastern Europe. So and from the Muslim countries actually as well, right? So and where do you get the talent into California from? From Nevada, right? So.
Do you think countries in Europe are working closely enough together to kind of accelerate the startups in the region?
Well, yes. I mean, the EU is actually really awesome, right? And it's under strain, but we hope it'll survive. And across many segments of government, we've had this amazing unification of policy, really thoughtful frameworks being put into place. And this is no exception. You've had the EIF, which is an entity that puts a lot of money into venture and has really seeded many amazing funds. And that's a result of cooperation across companies, across countries. Similarly, there's this idea of a digital single market that has been progressed and is still under discussion. But these things really help level the playing field, make it easier for a very fragmented continent normally to be able to develop technologies that then can be rolled out across 500 million people, as opposed to the US is only 300 million. So yes, I think people get it, right? I mean, if we're not going to succeed, it's not because governments aren't thinking the right way or aren't excited about it. It's going to be maybe extraneous reasons.
That's interesting you mentioned.
No, I think there is a gap still between the importance of of radical innovation for the future in general and the understanding from society, I would say, and government. You have a very motivated UK government and some other countries that this is not like their top priority, and this is strange if you consider the impact of innovation capital on who is today successful in the US in terms of companies. So I mean that message should have sunk in. It is still a novel concept in Europe for meaningful innovation to happen outside of established companies. And in a way, this is changing now, but there is still a way to go.
But I mean, coming back maybe to the EIF, because that's maybe not so well known outside of sort of the venture funds the EIF invested in. I mean, this is the European Investment Fund run by the European Investment Bank, and they deployed I think 40% of the deployed capital into venture capital funds in Europe come from the EIF. So that's a pretty strong effort by the European Union, and of course, also I agree with you. But then you do see a bit of a race almost from country to country right now. I mean, if you see what's happening in France, that's been
who is winning that race, would you say, at the moment?
Well, I think Europe is winning it, right? I mean, it's a very good race, basically, in the sense that it's not a zero-sum game, right?
But if you look at France or Germany or the UK, they're obviously in a different class to Slovenia and.
Well, obviously, I mean, but I think what's happening now is that we see, in 10 years from now or so, the size of the ecosystem and the venture capital invested will probably, my prediction will be it's a direct function, it's a percentage of GDP, right? I mean, it would be surprising if, in the end, the venture capital deployed in the Baltics is larger than, in Germany or in France. What happened was that some of the smaller countries in Europe actually had an advantage because they thought very global from day one. That's why, the Dutch or the Amsterdam ecosystem is really great. And then, the French, maybe they were sleeping a bit. The Germans, they were relying a bit on their larger domestic market. It's easy to say like, oh, we do this in Germany, but then you're kind of big enough to carry on, but not big enough to be global. So it was almost like a trap if you have a larger domestic market. And I think now what's happening is that they're all getting up to their potential, and then I think there will be sort of relative to where they stand as an economy and the size and the amount of people living there and whatnot.
Sorry, just one direct point. So in the last State of European Tech report we did, we actually found that curve is flattening. So the long tail, places like Lisbon or Warsaw, etc., like they're actually going up. So we're seeing a diversification of innovation across Europe. If that trend continues, and we'll see, in our report this year, that's a really good sign. And it's natural, right? I mean, if I'd started a company right after I finished Stanford, I would have done a terrible, terrible job. I mean, but I did an okay job. I managed to build a company because I joined Google and I learned a lot from what they did. So it's natural for a Polish engineer to work at maybe a UK company and then leave and then go back to Warsaw and start something. Like this kind of knowledge transfer, even if it starts off in some of the hubs, it's fine.
We still do have to understand from where we came from. The gap in venture capital to GDP is at least 5x between the US and Europe. So there's, it's not done. People tend to be really close to the tree, but there's still a huge gap.
Yeah, and I mean, what we see is there's angel capital available now. There's more sophisticated angels, even in sort of smaller ecosystems. And then, of course, for the rocket ship companies, if you do really well and KPIs out of the ballpark, then anybody will invest in you, and they will fly over from San Francisco to invest in you. But then you have this sort of middle tier there, where when you're not in Berlin or not in London, it's a bit harder to find money, because as an investor, you follow a company for a while, right? You don't invest, you don't meet them once and say like, oh, great numbers, I'll invest. Or ideally, you shouldn't. So I mean, you follow them for a while, and then in this smaller ecosystems, that's kind of still lacking. That actually good companies, I've seen this happening in Lisbon, good companies sort of drying up shortly before their Series A, because the bar for Series A is high, and then they don't find this 1 or 2 or 3 million to get there, which is a shame, because they're actually a good company. So there's definitely still room to grow.
So I spoke to the former Facebook CTO yesterday, the Quora founder now, and I was asking him, how long will it be before Europe starts creating companies on the same size and scale as the mega corporations that you have in the US? And he said he can't see a time when Europe creates a consumer internet company that's as big as Google or whatever. He said that Europe could potentially create a company in a slightly different area that's not a consumer internet company, so maybe an AI company, like DeepMind, although that was acquired by Google. But what kind of areas do you guys think Europe excels in? Where does Europe have the advantage over Silicon Valley? What industries? Is it drones? Is it something else? What are your thoughts?
Sure, I can start with that. So, again, because we're believers in deep tech, that's not an accident, right? I mean, we believe Europe is actually very good at that.
Define deep tech.
Deep tech, yes, it's a vague term, but it's generally, I like to think of it as something that is algorithmic innovation, right? So it's not necessarily Uber, which you could say, well, they maybe do some interesting routing algorithms, but things that maybe are employing machine learning, some kind of platform play, developer tools, IoT. That's generally the segment there. But there's a lot of great innovation coming out of these schools that we just talked about. And as Christophe has said, traditionally the outlet for these was often US or other companies. But now we have the will and the ambition and the places here doing that. So yeah, if we see big successes, and well, not if, when we see big successes, these are likely to be areas. And there's another really powerful factor here, and that is what you just mentioned, DeepMind. So DeepMind is the most interesting place on the planet right now for AI research, for AGI research, so artificial general intelligence. And they made a very conscious decision, and they said very explicitly to Google, we do not want to move from London. And they're still in London. They have their own building, or about to have their own building. They're very independent of the mothership. That's powerful. And around that oak tree, you get shoots, and you have other companies coming out of that whole ecosystem, people leaving. So I think the roots are there for strong AI, deep tech companies in Europe, based on our trajectory so far.
Another area that I think is very interesting, I mean, there are areas in manufacturing where Europe/Germany is actually leading, and these are interesting fields for innovation. And it's interesting because when a tech entrepreneur and people who have deep experience in industries come together and build a company, that's a type of constellation that I think will produce some unique companies here.
I mean, I think it's the entirely wrong question. It's kind of this it's the problem too, that you can't really predict the future based on the past, right? Because you can't really predict the paradigm shifts that will be happening. The only thing we know is they will happen. And the big consumer internet companies that are dominating the internet now, they were built based on a paradigm shift. They were built based on the web, because that was something entirely new. And the US had some large advantages to harvest these sort of low-hanging digital fruits, right? I mean, the ecosystem was there, people were ready for it, the money was there, but also a large homogeneous domestic market was there. And if you do digital distribution only, really low barrier, and network effect-based businesses, and we all know which ones we're talking about here, then of course the US has a huge advantage, right? And the discussion, how can we catch up to that, and when will we build a Google, is the wrong question, because we won't, right? We won't within this paradigm. But if you look at something like blockchain, it has the potential to create a paradigm shift just as big as the invention of the web. So if that happens, I don't see why it shouldn't happen here. And what Christophe mentioned is, right now we're seeing a second wave of digitization. The low-hanging fruits have been picked, but now, we see the digitization of luxury, travel, manufacturing, automotive, everything out there, every single industry that's there. And I think Europe actually has some unique advantages over that. I recently spoke to a company from Silicon Valley, who's a company we were looking at for investment, and they were in sort of a manufacturing, B2B space, quality control. And they said, well, we're moving to Germany now because the only manufacturers who are ready to try out our technology actually sit in Germany. And he literally said that manufacturing in the US is mostly in the state of the 60s. So I think we could easily look at a golden decade for Europe. And I totally don't see why the next Google, but it won't be Google, it will be something else entirely, right?
SoundCloud?
We think digital health. Do you think that digital health is going to emerge from the state of the health system in the US? I think the most interesting companies in digital health are actually happening in Europe. Blockchain is a very interesting example. This is like the one ecosystem where the epicenter is not in Silicon Valley.
Actually worldwide. So.
Tell us about blockchain in Berlin.
So, it is the Ethereum Development Office, for instance, is based here, right? The blockchain community in Berlin, and not only blockchain actually, but the whole security, privacy community here is happening here. And I'm seeing a lot of people moving from America here because they cannot work freely in this area in the US, for example, right? So the main blockchain conferences are also not moving to US or to the UK because a lot of people would be maybe stopped on the border and they couldn't even enter. So here, this deep tech understood, like as a low-level security, blockchain, fintech, it's happening in Berlin and in Europe.
What are some of the things that are holding Europe back from, competing with Silicon Valley? And I know it's kind of a cliche to say that, but
are we competing
what are the
with
disadvantages?
Are we competing with Silicon Valley at all, actually?
Well, we're competing with the world, right? Any idea worth doing, there's 10 startups doing it, and they're global. So, I would say we need to think in terms of competition. What's holding us back? So, late stage funding, there's still a big gap, and it's closing, but still 10x the difference. But maybe that matters a little less because some of the funding is now international. So, U.S. companies or VC funds or SoftBank or someone will invest in European companies. I think there's still a lingering cultural attitude toward risk, which is very subtle, but it manifests itself in various negative ways. So the attitude towards failure is not seen as something healthy, which it is, right? It's part of the innovation cycle. It's seen as something negative or a black mark. And that might mean as a founder, you just keep hearing negative things and you don't start your company, or as an employee you stay with Google, you don't leave this to start with a startup, or also I guess it's responsible in some ways for early exits. As a founder, you think, oh wow, okay, this is a good offer, I don't want to take the risk, and then your investors, your European traditional investors will also be saying the same thing. Oh, let's exit. That's $200 or $300 million. That's cool, but that's an anti-risk-taking attitude, and we have to get past that. And it takes a long, long time. Mm-hmm. But all the elements are in place, and success is going to help get us the confidence to get past this.
Siraj, we've been talking about this, attitude and the late-stage funding for the last 10 years on these panels, answering the same question the same way. And actually, I think that this is changing massively. Look at us. We are here for 15 years. We've all had our failures, and we're still here, right? And sitting on this panel, moving on. So I think that it's worth looking at the. It's not going to take long. This attitude is changing, and it's changing massively.
I think I'm not disagreeing, but I believe that on the founder level, the ambition level of the founders we work with, I think is on par now with the US. So what has not changed is as fast, I would say, is the general attitude of the society. Toward.
I totally agree with both this as
that is. But I can name a few founders here. They will go in all the way because it's their mission.
One company that's really been going for it and attempting to grow hugely is SoundCloud. They've raised a lot of money, and they're arguably Berlin's best-known startup. But last week they had some bad news. They've laid off 40% of their staff. What's your kind of view on what's happened there lately?
look at the community support for it, right? So, you know, it might have some problems, but I don't see, you know, you mentioned that the society hasn't changed, but SoundCloud has massive support, and actually the community loves it, and people want to,
But
because
just
it has
because the community loves it, that won't save the company.
Well, it's not just about community loving it as in, you know, having personal relations, but it's about the impact it actually has on Berlin, and it's on the internet itself. It's still one of the biggest companies in the world. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen there, right? I mean, they're in a difficult situation. They're doing what they have to do. I mean, it's not a charity, it's a business. If you want to survive, you have to make difficult decisions. And people often, with this whole buzz around startups right now, think, oh, it's great, everything just goes up. No, I mean, sometimes it's really difficult. Things go backwards. Sometimes businesses don't work out. And that's part of the innovation cycle. It's actually healthy. And we should celebrate.
The CEO said here yesterday that he wants to raise more money. Would you guys back him now?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly take a close look.
Definitely.
Definitely. Yeah. And
I mean, this is you have to
why
see.
are we not doing this?
This is.
So you all think that SoundCloud will go on, become profitable, and have a successful exit?
I think it's very, very difficult to say
No,
that.
but hold on. SoundCloud is a little bit of a different company than, I don't know, Google is or Facebook is, right? Because SoundCloud is a community, right? And I think that it has been a little bit misinterpreted by the classical venture capital, sorry guys, in some way. So, you know, I would back SoundCloud. We all said we would back SoundCloud, but we're still not doing it because we don't have the opportunity to do this, right? And the reason is not the company and the problems of the company, and the reason is not the company is not important enough, you know, for the internet community and development of the digital industry itself. The reason is that there is some problem with venture capital system itself about what it backs and why, right? Right now, SoundCloud is led by, 10 people maybe? 10 people are making decisions for hundreds of millions of users. Out of these 10 people, maybe 2 are entrepreneurs and maybe 2 care about music itself. If there was a way for everybody to back it, we would back it, and it will survive.
Can you tell us about that way? How?
You
How do we
have
do
this
that?
first question right there on top. Should I go
Yeah,
there?
I don't know.
Talk about blockchain ICOs.
I mean, at the end of the day, right, I mean, investors back businesses because they want returns. And,
Exactly.
and we're all very mission aligned. Like, we all want to be part of helping build the next Google. But, you know, you're not going to throw away money for that, right? So at the end of the day, you have to look at, is this a business that's going to succeed? And you have to make a decision on whether you do it or not. It's a great product. It's a fantastic experience. It's really important because
But does it make any money?
Well, that's what they have to do, and they're going through a tough time.
I think the better question is, does it provide any value? Because the problem here is that SoundCloud became misaligned, not even with the VCs that back it, but with the LPs of these VCs that are generating the numbers. And you know, the impact of the company is not necessarily measured by ROI.
I don't know. I mean, it's not a. This could have also gone right. You know, I mean, they tried to grow into it, and they had a very aggressive course. I mean, other companies have done that. It has nothing to do with, you know, had they been in the US, had they been more successful.
Exactly.
Definitely not. I mean, it's you look at other companies that were on a sort of a similar trajectory, like, you know, like a Foursquare that is now, you know, sort of turned it into a successful business. I mean, people think. Okay, you know, once you're past Series A and you're growing aggressively, you're kind of done, you know, company done. But now that we see the first consumer internet companies, you know, getting into the 7th, 8th, 10th year, you know, it's after every round, after every turn of the corner, the challenges change. They don't get less. They're just, you know, they just change. And then you're never really done, you know. Mm-hmm. And there's always, the world's changing so fast that there's always going to be a new threat to your model or whatever, and I'm very confident that they will navigate this. I mean, it's still one of the coolest companies ever built. So I mean,
in a way, it's important enough for both Berlin, European, and Czech ecosystem to stay, right? And they will make it one way or another.
But what does Christophe have to say? I mean, we have someone here who's on the board, so maybe we'll want to hear from him.
Well, I think it's a company that has a strong core. Both as a company and its user base, and now it's a bit in a way getting back to its roots, which are being a platform for creators, and in my opinion, it is a very one of the most transformative company in that space, and certainly also the largest when it comes to being a platform. So, you know, I think.
Where does it go from here, though? What does it have to do? It has to start making more money. The kind of revenue streams it has at the moment are advertising, and it has a subscription service. But if you look at the revenues, they are about half of what the losses are at the moment. So the company's in a tricky place. How does it go forward?
Look, it's sometimes easy and often wrong to be a backseat driver. It is a well-run company and a company with a soul, and I'm very confident that they will find a way.
But I think Zoe's point was very interesting earlier. You know, if you have a community like that, if they were founded now and knowing Eric and Alex, it would have been interesting to explore other ways to finance this company through the community, you know, through an ICO or whatever. I mean, I think that's actually something that now they would probably look at. And with that community as backers, that could be a very interesting alternative path to having, I mean, I don't, by no way I buy this thing that, you know, their VCs strong-armed them into being too aggressive. I mean, they're completely in charge of their company, whatever decision they took themselves. But of course, it could have been interesting to have more freedom from traditional investors. It's interesting. I mean, in the future, we could see for a company like Soundcloud would be ideal for this, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that VCs are driving it. This was not what I was trying to say. But you know, the agenda of the investors is not necessarily aligned with the agenda of the product and its users, right? And you know, I think that the company that could be compared here is Ethereum, right? Which is not VC backed, but it has tons of money. And is, you know, it's probably difficult to say whether it generates revenues or not, but certainly generates returns for its investors, who are the users and the community of it, right? And Soundcloud is a bit more of this kind of beast. You know?
To me, this distributed model, distributed power and distributed, also management that lies behind the whole blockchain infrastructure is certainly one of the more interesting things that we're seeing at the moment.
So we have less than 10 minutes left. I'll take a few questions from the audience now. So lots of people want to know, what is your biggest investment regret? I mean, that's quite a common question for VCs, but if you can just kind of give me something in 20 seconds, that would be great.
I'm not giving that.
No one wants to talk about it. Surprise, surprise.
Well, it's not SoundCloud. I don't know. Maybe Foursquare. Maybe I Am here in Berlin. I've sort of missed both of those. Could be cases for the anti-portfolio. Yeah.
It was unclear whether this is biggest regret in that you invested in it or that you didn't invest. So I'll go with the latter. You know, when I was building my company, I was just totally heads down, and one of my friends is good friends with a guy who founded Uber, not Travis, but the other guy, Garrett, whose idea it was. And I probably could have put some money in when there were like 5 guys, and I didn't. But you know, I guess it's not a regret, because if I'd been doing that, I probably would have been looking at angel investments, and then I wouldn't have succeeded with my company. So it worked out.
I actually have the same one.
Okay.
But I think one of the key ability in order to be successful in this line of business is to think forward. You know, I personally today am able to feel the same passion from day one from a new team and a new theme, and somehow they must have the ability to erase the one that didn't work out. Must be a key success factor.
I mean, if you look at kind of VCs, the kind of track record that people have, I think it's something like, I'll get this slightly wrong, but you know, 5 companies sort of fail, or you know, a few get the VC money back, and then 1 or 2 kind of take off and make a big profit for the investor. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, I mean, depends on the stage of the fund. The earlier stage you are, the more you know, misses you have, but then you're in early, so the successes are bigger and make up for that.
Other people want to know how will Berlin benefit from Brexit? Will it benefit in any way?
I'll let the Berlin guys take this one.
Yeah, I think it's marginal. Berlin has always benefited for the openness, and people always think about the costs, but I think the social openness and the fact that you can come from anywhere and find yourself at home, both you and your company and your family, in no time, that is the key success factor that we have. And that is required for an ecosystem. Look at the population of Silicon Valley. They're mostly foreigners.
There haven't been too many UK companies that have jumped ship yet. And I think German politicians were hoping slightly more may have done. Or do you see that changing in the next couple of years as Brexit kind of pans out?
It's possible. I mean, obviously, the JP Morgan boss just a couple of days ago was quoted for saying things like that. I think the problem with this line of thinking in general is that it makes one smug and comfortable and say, oh, look, we're benefiting from someone else's misery. The reality is the EU is a big deal, and we don't want to see it fail, right? And it could be Brexit last year. It could be, the dissolution of the EU in time. So we've got to not celebrate this and say, oh, we're going to benefit. It's got to be, well, how do we try and fix this or get back to it? And I want to see the EU succeed massively so Britain maybe comes back in 10, 20 years' time and say, sorry, guys, could you let us back in again?
Okay, and I'll ask... We've only got a minute left, but the most popular question that people want to know is they want advice. So startup founders that want to become angel investors and VCs, what would you say to them? What advice would you pass on?
If you're a startup founder, why would you want to become an angel or a VC?
Why did you?
Well, maybe after, I don't know. But when you're working on your startup, you shouldn't be investing.
That makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, have a big exit. Makes it a lot easier.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.